I
Right.
didn't.
I'm
What?
sorry.
She was looking for the word device.
Yes,
Had a
device.
meeting on
Thank you.
another
Yeah,
device.
yeah. Another
Yeah.
device. Yeah. So did he give a little teaching at the very beginning today?
Uh, no, the teaching was more at the end today.
At the end, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let me see. Uh,
Usually he just sort of dives in after he
no, he
does.
did give a teaching at the beginning, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
that was yesterday. I don't even remember.
Mm-hmm.
Um, about Dzogchen and bodhicitta. He was answering somebody's question.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
so yeah. Um, okay. So,
Oh, is that Ginger?
yeah, she's back.
Is she going to
Um,
stay with you?
no, I mean, I hope not. I'm still trying to find her home, but she had a terrible rash,
Mm.
um, that I felt like they weren't caring for properly. It's actually contact dermatitis. So, I asked them if I could just take her back for a little while to get her better.
Good.
So she came back today. So if I'm distracted, that's why. Anyway, um, okay, so let's get started. Um, I don't know how long, actually, before we start, I don't know how long these transmissions are going to go for. Still quite a bit to read, apparently. So, I think, I gauged 15 minutes after the end, but if you guys don't know when the end is, and I actually needed like more like half an hour. But so maybe if the since there's not many people who go to the transmissions, if the transmissions are continuing next Wednesday, is it okay if we start at 7? Is that all
Sure.
right? 7 to 8:30? Okay. So let's plan on that for next Wednesday unless there's no transmissions. Okay, great. Thanks, Pam. Okay. All right. So let's start now. To settle in first, bring our attention into the present moment, then generating our bodhicitta motivation, thinking about the suffering of all our mothers who have been so kind to us and who are suffering so intensely in this round of birth and death. So we make a strong, authentic, heartfelt wish to attain enlightenment for their benefit, so they can be free from suffering once and for all. Gonzalo Zangarab Shiri Sempana Karajavani Shuna Susan of Natatangasaso Katermanam so Wada. Omi Chigin Ki Podane Dusum Sange Kinging Oni at Sanchukuna Sundazepa. So in a Meshaba so Wada. Okay. And if for some reason Rinpoche goes until 7, which has happened once or twice, then I will send you an email, okay? And I don't know, we can skip the class or we could start at 7:30 and just go for an hour or something. So I don't want to keep you guys up till midnight. But you never know with these things, kind of how far they're gonna go. All right, so last week we covered the 6 rounds, so we're done with that. So this week we're gonna cover the Four Noble Truths. Okay. Um, okay. So four more we have 4 more classes, including today. So today, the February 25th, March 4th, and March 11th, that will complete session 3. And then we move on to session 4. which goes from March 18th to April 29th. And then we'll have a new class after that. Okay. All right. Okay, let's get my book set up. It was so nice this morning, the practice, wasn't it? 7:30 in the morning. So if everybody's free at that time and you want to join us for group practice on Zoom in the morning, it's really nice. 7:30 to 8:30. And you can come and go as you like. So if 7:30 is a little early for you, you can start at 8, or if you can start at 7:30 but you need to leave at 8, oh, that's totally, you're free. Just even if you just want to come for 15 minutes, that's also fine. But it's a good way to kind of get yourself started into a habit of practicing every morning. Okay, now I have to see how I can see you all. Okay. All right. Go. All right. So question number 1 is, please list the Four Noble Truths with a brief description for each. So I'm going to go on 1, 2, 3, 4 people instead of one person doing all 4. So Anne Marie.
Number 1 is the truth of suffering.
Mhm. And what would be a brief description of that?
Well, I'm gonna guess we really cause a lot of our own suffering by endless gibberish in our brains
Yeah,
and not
yes.
being in the present moment, and then
Or
our
more
karma
lights.
and our
Yes,
karma, just all
yes.
the stuff we do that makes our karma.
Okay, thank you. Lucy, what's the second one?
Um, the truth of the origin of suffering,
Mhm.
and that refers also to our actions and karma, and the fact that we're born, we become sick, we
Mhm.
get old, and then we die. And then if we're not enlightened, we get to do it all over again.
Yay.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, yeah. Ooh.
Okay. Liz, what's the third one?
The truth of the goal.
Mhm.
It's non-striving. We need to drop the effort to secure and solidify ourselves. And
Mhm.
also the awakened state is present.
Okay, thank you. And Tess, number 4.
That there's a way, there's a
Uh,
path. I'm
yes.
sorry, I'm just finishing my little snack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, 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 that's okay.
Okay.
That there is, that there
Okay.
is, that there's a way, that that with all that, there is, there's a way.
Okay. John, what is dukkha?
Dukkha is suffering, um, dissatisfaction and pain. It is a Sanskrit word, um, dissatisfaction.
Hmm.
Uh, Mind spins around. I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now we have a little discussion. So um, Rinpoche says here at the top, towards the top of page 152, um, dissatisfaction, as John said, or pain. So many of you, probably all of you, have heard me say this many times before about this word dukkha being typically translated as suffering. Okay. And there just really isn't a word in English that encompasses everything that dukkha is. Okay. Because dukkha is not just suffering, it's this dissatisfaction. It's this like constant sense of dissatisfaction. It includes suffering in the way that we think of suffering as English speakers, right? The heavy stuff, you wouldn't say like, if you just need a little glass of water, like, oh, I'm suffering from thirst, it's kind of like you're just a little thirsty. It's not that big of a deal, but that's dukkha, right? But also like getting skinned alive is dukkha. So it's really a wide range, and it's not just physical things, but it's mental in the way that Rinpoche describes here, which I'll talk about in a second. Lucy, you had a question?
No, I was going to say, to me, dukkha also is what Pema Chodron said, getting hooked by.
No,
No,
that's not no. You're
no,
no.
no,
Mm-mm.
that's different.
Yes, that's Shempa, not Dukkha.
Okay, okay,
Shempa. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
all right, thanks.
Yeah.
I think it was you once you told us, which I always think of this one. You said subtle, incessant dissatisfaction. Sid,
Oh,
I think it
yeah.
was you who said that.
Really? I
And then
don't remember
you,
saying that,
or
but
someone that had said it, but I think of that like it's sometimes just the like, I don't know, I think it describes the little stuff
it's
accurately.
yeah, that's really good. That's really
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
So
I
wait,
think
it was subtle, incessant dissatisfaction?
Dissatisfaction.
yeah. Yeah, but I think I read that. I think it was not me. I think I was reading a quote from somebody else. That's far too clever for
Oh,
myself.
gosh,
Um,
you go to the store and you want something to, oh, I'm gonna buy some lotions and potions, and then you come home and you say, oh, geez, that's totally
yeah,
dukkha.
yeah, yeah. Um, so Rinpoche says here the dissatisfaction occurs because the mind spins around in such a way that there seems to be no beginning and no end to its motion. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but like that's my entire world.
Mhm.
Um, Thought processes continue on and on, thoughts of the past, future, thoughts of present. This creates irritation. Thoughts are prompted by and are also identical with dissatisfaction, dukkha, the constantly repeated feeling that something is lacking, incomplete in our lives. I find that so good. Um, Somehow something is not quite right, not quite enough. So we're always trying to fill the gap, to make things right, to find that extra bit of pleasure or security. The continuing action of struggle and preoccupation is very irritating and painful. Eventually, one begins to become irritated by just being me.
That really spoke to me, that particular one, because I can tell times when I'm super off and I'm like, I can't stand myself right now.
Yeah,
And then I look at this, I'm like, okay, good. There is something to this.
yeah,
I remember when I was completely, when it really clicked and it was so simple, but when Buddhism clicked for me is when it said that just that general dissatisfaction, that general constant uneasiness in life. I'm like, well, why didn't I hear about this before?
yeah.
Because just it sums it up so perfectly.
Yeah, and it's just like this is like this notion is one of many really, but as it usually comes at the beginning of the path, I think it is something that um it kind of inspires people to go further on the path, because it's so obvious once you start to think of it, once you're introduced to the idea, you're like, oh, of course, right? And there's so many other things that are like that in this path, and it's very um I don't want to say inspiring, but it's kind of just
Validating.
yes, it's validating, and it kind of really shows um how much common sense there is in this path, and how it's just like really makes so much sense, you know. And then they hit you with like there's six realms and the bardo and there's deities. And you're like, what happened to all this other stuff that like make total sense, like the four noble truths, oh my god. That was my reaction. But anyway, it still makes sense, you just got to work through it a little more.
Mhm.
Okay, so so he's saying, no matter what we do, life contains dukkha, dissatisfaction, pain. And this is something, when the Buddha, it kind of always amazes me, and that, the Buddha could have said anything. Like, he had just attained full enlightenment. He had, incredible knowledge at that point. And he decides that his first words of teaching are going to be, there is suffering. He could have talked about impermanence. He could have talked about the realms. He could have talked about emptiness. Could have talked about anything, and he chose that. And when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, we need that as the first step, because of course we know there's suffering, right? We're all very familiar with suffering of all types, but this kind of suffering, this kind of constant dissatisfaction, this kind of no escape from suffering, we're not, or we don't pay attention to that. Yeah, we always think that like happiness is just around the corner. you know if I just get a new job, I'll be happy. If I just, move house, I'll be happy. If I just get married, I'll be happy. If I just get divorced, I'll be happy. All this stuff, right? And we don't notice that, like, we never actually get the kind of lasting happiness we're searching for, right? So when the Buddha points this out, he's like, this is how things are. Then we have a starting point. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just kind of continuing to swim in our own ignorance and thinking that we can make some kind of progress without dealing with the basics, without dealing with the foundation. Yeah. Um, okay. Uh, oh God. Yeah. Somehow we pattern life in a way that never allows us enough time to actually taste its flavor. There's continual busyness, continual searching for the next moment, a continual grasping quality to life. That is dukkha, the first noble truth. Understanding and confronting suffering is the first step. You know? Um, right. So then he says, right now we become aware of this and we want to look for the source, and that's the second noble truth, right? So what is the cause, the origin of suffering? Um, he says, we are continually struggling to maintain and enhance ourselves. We realize that this struggle is the root of suffering. Um, so he's saying this struggle of how ego develops and operates is the origin of suffering. So this is this, and also the third noble truth that Rinpoche points out here, even the fourth. Um, it's These are good examples of how Trungpa Rinpoche approaches traditional subjects in an unconventional way. Okay. He's really saying the same thing, but he's saying it in a different way. So typically, depending on the school, right? So the Theravada school, and if I know that some of you have not been around for a long time, so when we talk about there's three paths, right? There's the Theravada, there's the Mahayana, and there's the Vajrayana, and that's a long story which we don't have time to go into right now. But from the Theravada path, the cause of suffering is craving, right? So their goal is to get rid of craving. So get rid of desire altogether, because it's, from their philosophical point of view, it's desire that causes suffering. But from the Vajrayana point of view, it's this fundamental ignorance, this ma rikpa, that causes suffering. Yeah. Essentially, uh, believing in a truly existent, permanent I, like I am. Yeah. This is the cause of suffering. But that misconception is this marikpa, this really, really deep ignorance. Okay. But here he's saying it's this struggle, right? When we need to search the reason, the source of desire by examining our thoughts and actions, we discover that we are continually struggling to maintain and enhance ourselves. That is saying the same thing. That we have a misperception of how we exist. Yeah. And we think that we're solid, permanent, independently existent. Okay. And because of that, we have this continual struggle to maintain and enhance ourselves. But it's all a delusion. The thing we're trying to maintain doesn't even exist in the way that we think it does. Okay. So we seek an understanding of the purpose of the struggle. That is, of how ego develops and operates this second noble truth. Okay. So then we come to question number 3, which is the goal of spirit, oh my goodness, I'm sorry about the way I phrased this question. Is the goal of spirituality to conquer and destroy ego? Why or why not? And I put that question in a very stupid way. Yes, Tess.
I found this really interesting because the idea of, so as I was reading this, I got the idea that no, it is not actually to conquer and vanquish the ego. Because that in itself is like, if you're doing this for, I'm going to be better, I'm going to never get irritated with anybody ever, blah, blah, blah. I'm not, then that's spiritual materialism right there. And the idea of, that, oh, it's so tricky because, the idea of of using mindfulness, for example, I use it as a non religious based, I use it as a secular tool, simple mindfulness, breathing in, breathing out. Can you feel your body drop into your body? That's as far as I go when I'm working with, well, maybe a little further, but the idea that it is not that the ego, somebody once told me, and I don't think he says it here, but somebody once told me, one of my colleagues said, one of the reasons that we have 5 fingers and a hand that can grasp is that's the developmental phase of ego, that we need to be able to hold on to things and then let go of them. And, that's a neurobiological thing. And that the ego is a part of our development as human beings. We don't, and so but it's not something to reject straight out. It's something to recognize that it's a part of our the way human beings function, but that we don't need to be ruled by it. And so to use the awareness of what it is that we're actually trying to do, which is to wake up to our true selves and our true sense of, just as you were saying a minute ago, that what we really think we are is not what we really are. So to wake up to that, the Tathagata Garbha, or the the Buddha self, or the good nature, or not good nature. What's the other one? The
Basic goodness
basic goodness. Yeah.
and
So
Buddha
that's
nature.
Buddha nature. Thank you. That's my thank you for letting me
Yeah,
dive
no,
into that.
it's interesting. And I'm glad you raised that because there's a difference. I'm quite sure that I couldn't precisely define it, but there is a difference between the Buddhist understanding of ego when spoken about in this way versus the psychological definition of ego as kind of the development of the person. Like, we're not suggesting, and you were not saying this, I'm just putting it out there, that we're not suggesting that we should not have like personhood or
Right.
personality or and be individuals, right? It's something different. And when we speak about ego, we're not talking about the healthy ego that exists in psychology, right? That we need to have some kind of healthy sense of self.
Selfhood, good
Yes.
selfhood. Yeah.
Right. So we're not really talking about that from the necessarily from the Buddhist point of view. Yeah, it's more of on a conceptual, really subtle conceptual level.
Mhm.
Liz?
I was thinking that Westerners must have like originally and still driven Tibetan Buddhists or Indian Buddhists nuts because in this part, they talk about that ambition to improve ourselves is itself the problem. And isn't that such the Western concept? I'm going to be the best version of myself. And the harder it is, the better my gains, and struggle's part of the process. And they're saying that insight only comes when there are gaps in the struggle. It's almost like when you stop trying so hard
Right.
is when it clicks. And that just goes against like everything that I feel like we've learned ever.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm like, we must just, they probably had to learn an entirely different way to teach this just because of us.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are different ways. You have to teach to the audience, right? So, Tibetans needed to be encouraged to um, understand the teachings more, like to study, right? Because they're very good at devotion and trust and faith, but they're not that good at explaining the Four Noble Truths, even something as simple as that, or the Noble Eightfold Path or something. These very beginning teachings, they couldn't tell you what they are, you know? Where Westerners are like very skeptical, really hard to have devotion and faith and, trust, but really good at the intellectual stuff, you know. So ideally, at least as far as I understand it, the ideal student is a good combination of those two things, you know. But it's just the way that the Western mind works also versus the Eastern mind in relation to spiritual matters, and maybe in relation to other matters too, because I mean, if you look at India, like even like your music teacher is a kind of guru, there's a sacred element there and
Mhm.
a tremendous amount of respect, right? Um, so, from the Eastern point of view, it's kind of like you go to the teacher and they give you one instruction and you go off and do that thing. And then you come back and you're like, okay, I did the thing. What's next? And then they give you the next thing, right? Whereas Westerners, like, we're not going to take a single step unless we know the entire path. Where is this going? Right? So we have to be told, kind of given that whole thing before we take the first step. Sheila?
This just reminds me, and it's kind of making me laugh what you said and Liz, that I was working with these kindergarten teachers, and we always make up these big questions that the kids are supposed to, like as much as a 5-year-old can. And the
Right.
question the book gave was, what does it mean to try hard? And I'm like, there's something about this question I don't like, because the whole thing was like, if you try hard, you're gonna get exactly what you're going for. It was like the whole
Yeah.
point of it. And so we can't, like, you can try and try and try at something and you might never get it. So can we just be like, you can try and maybe you'll get it. And these
Yeah.
kindergarten teachers, and we got into this big, and the kindergarten teachers were like, this is getting too deep. But I'm like, we start telling kids, like, it just reminded me that we start like putting this in their mind at a very
Yeah.
young age that, like, if you just try, then you're going to get what you want. And there's going to be
Yeah.
this point where you have achieved this ultimate thing. And we are telling people this when they're 5. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
so
not.
pervasive.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we did change it a little. They did Buddhist, they did make it a little less, but they
That's
did look at
good.
me like, I don't know what you're talking about. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but it is
Yeah.
just one of those where, like, that it's so embedded in
Yeah.
how we look at the world.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the things Liz brought up, earlier, just this whole attitude of like no pain, no gain. We have this very uh goal forward kind of attitude, and stressful type of attitude that doesn't really exist so much in the East, But like Zonzar Kensman Bichet was talking about that. I think it was him. And he was talking about the difference between the two, and he's like, well, I mean, Westerners are just like, they have this fault of like like worshiping busyness, you know, and just being busy, 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 busy all the time. Whereas Indians have this fault of just sitting around all day drinking tea. And he's like, that's not really good either, you know? And it's true. And it like drives us crazy. Like I remember being in India, just being like, how can you, are you still sitting there? Like, what are you doing? You know, do something, you know? So, yeah, it's just very, um, I just learned something about French culture today, and this is a good example too of like the difference between the cultures, you know, and how you like Americans are like, we really value being straightforward, and we see that as good. We see that as honest, you know, just tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I want to. But you know what I mean? So we kind of value this like straightforwardness, yeah. Whereas the French, like, holy, it's implying from the left, implying from the right, beating around the bush for half an hour, you know, and you're supposed to divine from these, you know, magical symbols, like what it is they want, you know, what is wrong, you know, or like you're just supposed to figure it out. And for us, when we're trying to interact without knowing this aspect, and I had this trouble for years in France because I did not understand it. I'm like, why are you being sneaky? I saw it as sneakiness, as like kind of dishonesty, you know, like just tell me. And from their point of view, it's like, why are you being so rude? You
Yep,
know, right?
yep.
And this new thing I learned today was that in French, you're supposed to interrupt. Like if you're having like a conversation, like among friends, you're supposed to interrupt. And like in our culture, like we have a kind of natural interruption, you know, thing like among friends, but like it's value to like wait and until someone finishes speaking and then you jump in with it, whatever it is you want to say. But she was saying like if you don't do that, they think you're cold or you're not interested. We're like we're just sitting there like waiting for a gap in the conversation before we can say something, you know, and I think we're being polite, but from their point of view, this person's not even interested in the conversation. Now, I have a caveat to that, and my French is no way good enough to jump in on anything. You know, by the time like I hear a point that I understand, and I'm trying to form the question in my mind in French, how to say something, you know, by that time they're five subjects down the road, you know. So I'm like, oh well, I lost my chance, you know. So anyway, yeah, so it's quite different, and that's why too, like all the teachings are there. Like Rinpoche told us, you know, he wanted our altars to be simple, and he wanted the temple to be simple. But in Tibet, it's like very ornate, you know, and he was like, that's because like look at Tibet, you know, it's just like the plains, it's this plateau, you know, there's all this space. And so this is kind of in contrast to that. And it's like in the West, you have so much input and so much stimulation that you really want a more simple temple, a more simple altar, right?
Mm.
And like we need to be taught not to hate ourselves, right? And like this concept like doesn't really even exist in Tibetan culture, right? But it's not like the teachings aren't there. They're there. It's just what you emphasize on, you know, what you spend more time on versus another, you know, another thing. So um, I don't care if the Tibetans are frustrated with us. I'm frustrated with them. Yes, yes.
I just wanted to say, to add to what Liz was saying about the Western acculturation, as it were,
Yeah.
about, and it is like an acculturation process around achievement.
Hmm.
One of the things, you know, I work with new parents often, you know, and they have proud parents of a baby girl, baby boy, them, whatever it might be. And
Hmm.
there's an app called Modern Miracles or something like that. And it goes week
Hmm.
by week by week of all of okay, by week one, the baby will be sleeping 90% of the time. By week two, three, four. By week 12, the baby will open his or her eyes and smile.
Right.
By week 14, the baby will start to figure out how to roll over. By week 16, et cetera, et cetera. You
Right.
get
You
the
get it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and I cannot tell you how many parents have decided to go to the pediatrician because their baby wasn't making that 16-week milestone. And it's,
Sure.
they don't realize, they don't recognize, and the makers of this app they're not subtle enough to say, look, there's a confidence interval here.
Mhm.
2 weeks on this side, 2 weeks on this. Some babies don't smile until they're 20 weeks old. Not well. And that's
Yeah.
when the bond starts to get really formed, is when a baby kind of wakes up from being a blob, like
Mhm.
ugh, to like, oh yeah, oh yeah. And I'm not being rude, I'm sorry, but that parents often really start to experience the babyhood when the baby smiles. And
Mhm.
when the baby doesn't smile, they think, oh no, my baby has Asperger's.
Right.
I
Right.
cannot,
Right.
so it's such a huge thing. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Another.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Sorry.
interesting to just notice and comment on it.
I would like
Yeah.
to, I would like to think about that app at 51 if it was continuing. What metrics am I supposed to have achieved?
Yeah, let's do it.
How about
Okay.
20 years on? What am I supposed
Mhm.
to achieve
Oh,
20 years
gee.
on from 50? You
Yeah,
know,
Give up.
50 plus.
Give
there is
up.
an essay, strive forever,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also. I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but I was reading like a baby book, based on Tibetan um culture, like how they raise their babies. What they do. And one of the things they do is like the babies almost never cry, because as soon as they just make a little like whimper, like the beginning of a cry, someone's picking them up
Right.
and dealing with them. But that's like village, yeah, that's a extended family living together kind of
Mhm.
situation, right? Not like what we have here. But I found that very interesting too. Whereas, I mean, thankfully we're past that point where people just let their children cry and cry and cry and cry and cry. Um,
Do you think
but
that changes their capacity to tolerate and learn how to soothe themselves? I mean, I'm not trying to be a
no,
problem
I
here,
think
but
no, I mean, nobody's soothing them, and
well,
nobody's,
when you get picked up, that isn't that a soothe?
yeah, but I mean, the babies who are just left to cry it out, they just give up. I don't think they're soothing themselves,
Oh, I'm not,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But no, I think it gives them a sense of love, and they're secure and people care about them.
Mm.
And I don't know. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's an interesting topic, but it just was another thing that,
Well, they're
you know,
also allowed to be children and babies rather than you've got to accomplish this.
yeah, nobody's
Yeah.
playing classical music in the womb. Okay. So so now we're looking at this conquer and destroy ego question number 3. Um
Well, that was a big discussion about conquering and destroying ego, right?
Not really. It's mostly about culture, but okay.
Well, but I'm saying,
So
what?
insights come only when there are gaps in our struggle.
Mhm.
So we've discussed this in various ways throughout this text of kind of the, the how we kind of get wound up in the struggle, and how the struggle itself creates suffering, and how like it is something that sort of feeds the ego, right? It sort of solidifies the whole situation, this struggle, right? um yeah, I don't know. I was something else I wanted to say, but I don't remember. People mistake thinking that see the ego as the root of suffering. Mm, okay. uh Third noble truth, the truth of the goal that is non-striving. So non-striving is that lack of struggle, right? Um, so that's interesting. This is another thing that's like how Rinpoche put his particular spin on it. Yeah. Normally, the third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering. Yeah. Um, that it is possible to stop suffering altogether. Yeah. And here he's saying the truth of the goal, which is non-striving. Yeah. And then he goes on to say that like just letting go is it's not really like it's only possible for short periods, that we need some discipline to bring us to letting be. We have to walk a spiritual path. Yeah. So I think that's something that is perhaps another difference between the two cultures, is this notion that we tend to have, and he brings it up a little bit later in this chapter too. Um, we kind of, as Westerners, in contradiction to our like work mentality regarding the spiritual path, we tend to have this feeling like it shouldn't really require work or any sacrifice, you know, like I don't know if it was this class, must have been this class, but some time ago when people were going like, but it's hard. Remember?
That's us. That's me. I shouldn't speak for anyone else.
You were not the
That
only
was his
one.
class. That was
We're
his
not the
class.
only one. And I was like, like, yes, it's hard. Like, so what? You know, it's not gonna be easy all the time, you know, but it's worth it, right? And we should expect to have to make some effort and to take our own path into our own hands and not expect the lamas to do it for us, or the Buddhists to do it for us, or this book to do it for us, you know? Somebody asked a question, do one of you two, the twins who were at the, I assume you guys have been going pretty much every
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Do you remember, it was maybe last week or something? I have to look at my recordings, but Rinpoche said like, oh, which is you just expect us to do everything for you. Like, oh, maybe we should read it for you too, or should we feed you but with a spoon? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, because he was talking about, does somebody eat for you? Does somebody
Yeah,
digest for you? Does somebody shit for you? That's,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And,
I
but
remember
the
that,
thing,
but I
but
don't
the
remember
thing
the.
is, can I,
Yeah, he said that whole thing. Does somebody eat for you, digest for you,
but
shit
Yeah,
for
but
you?
the
what
thing
was
that
the
I took
question?
from
Like,
it,
why did he say that? Is my question. I remember the answer, but not the question.
because he was emphasizing the fact that only the individual, that's what I took from it, can do what needs to be done. Nobody can hand it to you on a platter, because we've
Hmm.
said that in this class too. But that's what I took from what he was saying. Nobody can do it for you. You,
Lucy,
Yeah,
I
but
don't think,
what?
Pomo, I
Go
don't
ahead.
think, honey, Pomo, I don't think that he was answering a question though. I think he was
Oh,
just, it was part of his discussion as he was talking.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
In
Yeah,
my mind,
it,
I don't know, for some reason I'm remembering it as a question, but
uh-huh.
okay. Yeah.
I
I,
Yeah.
don't think, because I remember laughing about that, you know.
Because I was like, I must have like drifted off or something in my head, because I
Mhm.
remember feeling mortified for whoever asked the question. I was like, oh, I would feel so bad if that was the answer and I had asked a
Yeah.
question.
No,
Go ahead, John.
I, this,
Oh,
this discussion inspires me to reference Master Yoda. No try, do. No
mm-hmm,
try, do.
mm-hmm.
Which is the hardest part of this. Let's just drop you guys.
Okay.
Because I was thinking of, like it's if we try, that's not right, because that makes it more solid. But just accepting and doing
Mm-hmm,
is, like a path, the path without creating more crap in the way.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, third noble truth, non-striving. So non-striving, I want to just emphasize, it doesn't mean just laying around doing nothing. Okay.
Rats.
Too bad. Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, I'm not just lying around doing anything, but I'm
Yeah.
kidding, obviously. Oh, rats.
But rest. Yeah. Um, yeah, so it's really answered in the previous chapters in this text what that means, where we're not like fabricating something. Yeah. We're letting things be, as he described earlier in this chapter. We're not trying to fabricate something. We're not trying to feed the ego. We're like dropping the struggle, this kind of thing. If we're just sitting around watching Netflix and, eating expired Valentine's Day candy or whatever, right? There's no wisdom there. There's no clarity there. We're kind of in the animal realm in that sort of situation where we're just sort of shutting off. Yeah. That's not what is meant by this. But this non-striving, non-effort concept is very, very big in Dzogchen, the highest among these paths. Okay, so now comes a difficult question, I think, potentially. We'll see. In 25 words or less, please summarize Rinpoche's take on meditation. So end of page 153 to the middle of page 156. So when he starts talking about the Four Noble Truths. Louise,
Breathe.
breathing,
Breathe.
breathe.
Yeah, meditation is not mental gymnastics. You don't have to go through any formula or routine or special striving. Just focus on the breath. Breathe in, breathe out. No
Okay.
attachment.
All right. Sheila?
I think of it as that it's noticing what the breathing is there, but just noticing what's there. You're not trying. Like if you're sitting there, be like, okay, what is it? Always reminds me of the Seinfeld, serenity now, serenity now. Like if you keep saying serenity now, what does he
Yes.
finally say? Insanity later, but that you can't force it, that it is just seeing. And when you're noticing what's there, then it doesn't matter as much. It's hard to just notice it because most of the things we notice, we're like, oh, that really made me mad, or oh, that really made me happy, or oh, that really made me sad. And then it gets into this whole other thing. But to be like, oh, that to see it and be with it and not have a whole other thing happening while you're doing it.
Okay. All right. Good. Then, Pam, do you have an answer for this one?
I said it was a pause. It's a stepping out of the ego to be in the present moment, here and now.
Okay. Good. Good. Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
It's the absence of trying. Whenever you're trying, whether it's concentrating in meditation, it's really doing, recognizing, rather than trying to concentrate, trying to focus, trying to this. And that was the hardest part, to go, yeah, I do that all the time. Like I'm sitting there going, I'm going to concentrate on this, or put on music that I can focus on that, and going, I guess he's telling me all those things are crutches,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to interfere with you being able to do it without those things, and you being able to see without trying, in a way.
Okay. Anne Marie, you wanted to add something?
Oh, I don't know if I'm adding anything, but I'll read my answer.
Sure.
We need to transcend the dualistic view of life, be less fascinated with goals, and work with the present state of mind.
Very good. Lucy?
The thing I took from it is that the more you meditate, the more you give yourself the opportunity to have that space between. And so that meditation is super important. You know, you may practice, you may do all the intellectual things, but you do have to meditate because that gives you the space to
Mm-hmm.
perhaps experience that moment of space where it's just there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. Even mindfulness of breathing practice, as I've said many times, if are attending whenever I lead meditation, um, one of the major benefits of regular mindfulness of breathing practices, we start to see the space between kind of ourselves and our thoughts and emotions instead of thinking like totally identifying with them and thinking I am my thoughts and emotions, which is kind of how we normally go through life. But when the instruction is to sit and just follow the breath, no matter what thoughts and emotions arise, we start to understand that we actually have the freedom to choose how we respond rather than just have a knee-jerk reaction to everything, right? Because we start to see that these thoughts and emotions actually don't have any power over us. Yeah. And then we get a lot more freedom to make a choice, right, about what we do, what we say, how we respond, how we feel even. Okay. So that's one thing that allows us to kind of have this breath. And the way that Rinpoche teaches meditation, I think comes up later. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if we're doing mindfulness of breathing practice, there's the in breath, there's the out breath, and then there's a gap. And then there's the in breath and the out breath and the gap. Yeah. Normally I don't talk about that because that's not how we were like given instruction, but Trungpa Rinpoche talks about that a lot. Tess, you wanted to say something?
I I was wondering if you could say a few words about shamatha, because the sense is that he said it's really important to develop shamatha, the development of peace. And so I wanted to make sure that I was understanding what he was saying here, because he's earlier, this is on page 157.
Yes, but we'll get there. We'll get
Oh,
there.
we haven't gotten quite there. I
No.
wanted to ask you a question about it, so
Yeah.
when we get
Can you
there.
ask when we get there?
Oh, sure. I
Okay.
sort of stepped away for a minute, so I kind of lost track of the question
Yeah.
that you
That's
were
okay.
asking.
No problem. So, so I just want to go over some of these main points, right, with this fourth noble truth. Again, where he says the spiritual path, the practice of meditation. So, the fourth noble truth. So, in the Theravada tradition, the path is the noble eightfold path: right livelihood, right speech, right thought, whatever. Okay. In the Vajrayana, it is not just meditation. The path is anything and everything that we do. So our sadhana practice, our the practice we do in between our formal sessions, all of those things, the hearing and studying, contemplation and meditation are all part of the path. Here he is just focusing on meditation. So so he first mentions, kind of concentration, and he's saying like it's not really, whatever the best or something, it's kind of uh this is what he calls mental gymnastics, right? Because it does not attempt to deal with the totality of any given life situation. And it's based entirely on this or that subject object rather than transcending the dualistic view of life. So if we're concentrating on something, we're concentrating on the breath or we're concentrating on an image, right? In a way, we're sort of reinforcing that dualistic thought. Okay. Then he talks about the practice of samadhi, which he says doesn't involve concentration, which is like news to me. So I was thinking, oh, okay. So again, he says concentration practices are largely ego reinforcing, although not purposely intended as such. Um, then he talks about it's like centralizing in the heart. Um, we're trying to intensify the solid aspect of form. Uh, in the long run, such a practice could be dangerous depending on the intensity of the meditator's willpower. We might become introverted in a way that is too solemn, fixed, and rigid. So he's talking about samadhi. This sort of practice is not conducive to openness and energy, nor to a sense of humor. It is too heavy, etc. So I'm honestly a little confused by this section because I thought that samadhi was like a very deep state of concentration. And here he's saying it's not doesn't even involve concentration. So I have to believe then that I don't really understand the word. I'm just going to go to Rigpa Wiki here and see what they say. Samadhi, Tingenzin, is often translated as meditative absorption or concentration. Samadhi can refer to both the practice and the state of meditation. In the Sanskrit, samadhi means to hold things together. The Tibetan Tingenzin means to hold firmly and unwaveringly from the depths so that there is no movement. So I don't know. I'm confused, honestly. Does anybody understand this? Have a better
I wonder,
understanding?
I have a question about it.
Yeah,
When I, in the 60s, I
yeah,
remember some people coming into various groups I was associated with and did deep meditations and some attempting to go get, and I remember a number of people going nuts. They
yeah.
lost contact with, it's just like they did too much, too far, too something. Little drugs might have been a part of the problem as well,
Hmm.
because it was like, tune in, tune out,
Right.
and all of this. But it was because just when I was reading this, when one particular person came into my mind, a memory of this person who was very ordinary person and then started meditating and just really just it was a he became totally unhinged, and I wondered if that's what he was saying here. He was trying so hard, and it was
Hmm.
just like, and he went so far in that he couldn't get out of the get.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean,
I wondered about that because
that
he was writing this during those times, I think, right?
potentially, yes. I don't know when this particular teaching was given, but
Uh-huh.
um potentially, yes. But this really emphasizes also like the importance of having a teacher,
Hmm.
you know, and why people shouldn't do like very, very heavy practice without instruction and without the guidance of a lama, because of stuff like that. If people just go off by themselves, they can be dangerous. It's true. Um,
I don't know if this applies, but maybe when you were talking about this samadhi, like it reminded me of like when you first start doing visualizations. Like I've always had a hard time with visualizations, and I think that like maybe the difference is like you can get so wrapped up in like every detail, and all you're thinking about is like, am I doing like it's too much. Where then I think, and this I'm really remembering everything you say tonight, Pamo. Once you said that it should be like you don't think about remembering your kitchen. Like you
right,
could picture your kitchen or you could picture the hallway in your house and you could picture everything about it. And you don't
right.
have to think like, okay, this is there, this is there. So like, and
Hmm.
that's like, I guess, like the difference between like concentrating so hard on that, but just being like,
Hmm.
oh, there's the picture of it. It's just
Right,
there and it's there. And you're not
right.
like gripping and fixing
Yeah,
on it.
yeah. So that's the kind of rigidity, I guess, that he mentioned there. where we're so tense about trying to be perfect in our meditation or trying to get every detail or trying to, not have 1 millisecond of distraction that we tie ourselves into knots, essentially, right? And there's no openness or energy or sense of humor, as he says here, which kind of like we need to be able to breathe, you know? Um, and I think for a lot of Westerners, that's hard for the reasons that we discussed earlier. Yeah. But this great woman master called Machik Labdrun, she said, best relaxation, best meditation. So we really have to keep that in mind. That,
Mm.
that's why I often bring that up when I'm guiding meditation to say, like, your body should be as relaxed as possible while maintaining the posture. And your mind should be as relaxed as possible while maintaining awareness of the breath. Because if we're like grasping after it, and they say this in the teachings, like we shouldn't be like a cat at a mouse hole, like just, waiting, right? We should be relaxed. And this can be hard for us because we're so indoctrinated into this no pain, no gain, this worship of things being hard and busyness and stress. Like we like that, we try to outdo each other in how busy we are and how
Mm-hmm.
stressed out we are, you know. Did you want to say something, Liz? I thought I saw movement there. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. So on the next page towards the top, he said, we tend to live in the future, our view of life colored by the expectation of achieving an ideal goal. Because of this expectation, we miss the precision and openness and intelligence of the present. We are
Mhm.
fascinated, blinded, and overwhelmed by the idealized goal. So that is very much related to what I've said many times about, we have to start where we are. We have to accept and face where we are and deal with that rather than focusing so much on where we want to be or worse, where we think we should be, right? I've had X amount of, you know, I've done X amount of retreat and I read X amount of books and I received X amount of empowerment. So, you know, why can't I concentrate for more than 5 minutes? Right? It doesn't matter. It's not, the fact is, you can't concentrate for more than 5 minutes. Start there. Okay, how can I concentrate for 6 minutes? You know, rather than being embarrassed and just kind of fighting, struggling against the situation as it is in the present moment. So then the last paragraph on page 155, he says, inasmuch as real meditation practice is a way to step out of ego, the first point is not to focus yourself too much upon the future attainment of the awakened state of mind. The whole practice of meditation is essentially based upon the situation of this present moment, here and now, and means working with this situation, this present state of mind. Any meditation practice concerned with transcending ego is focused in the present moment. It's wild. I like how I would never put those two things together, but having reading him put those things together, it really does make sense.
What are
Um,
you referring to, Palmo? Putting what two things together?
Putting the transcending ego and being in the present moment.
Okay,
Putting these two ideas together. Any meditation practice concerned with transcending ego is focused in the present moment. I just never put those ideas together, that grasping after the future is ego based.
okay.
Okay. So then he talks about technique in that same paragraph. We may use various meditation techniques, but these techniques are simply a way of stepping out of ego. Technique is like a toy given to a child When the child grows up, the toy is discarded. In the meantime, technique is necessary in order to develop patience and to refrain from dreaming about the spiritual experience. One's whole practice should be based on the relationship between you and nowness. So this reminds me of like what the Buddha said about the path, the Buddhist path. He said, even that you will have to let go of at some point. He said, it's like a raft that to get you across the river. You know, once you get to the other side of the river, you're not picking up the raft and carrying it around on your shoulder. You leave it there, you know, at the bank. So we're transcending even the path. Okay. All right. Now we get to. Oh, wait. No. Now there's one more thing. So this is what I wanted to say about Rinpoche's way of teaching meditation. So it's the second to last paragraph on page 156. And he said, and it is the same with the practice of the awareness of breathing. You become aware of the breath coming into your nostrils, going out, and finally dissolving into the atmosphere. It is a very gradual and detailed process, and acute precision is involved with its simplicity. If an act is simple, then you begin to realize its precision. One begins to realize that whatever we do in everyday life is beautiful and meaningful. So his way of teaching, or in that tradition, whatever, mindfulness of breathing is they say like you breathe in, you breathe out, and the mind goes with the out breath. And then goes out with the out breath, I think is the way they describe it. And then there's a gap, and then you breathe in. So it's very different from how we teach it, but it's an interesting way to do it. Okay. And then he gives this example of pouring a cup of tea. And this is kind of also a little bit what the Zen people do, you know, like Zen cooks, if you're cooking in the monastery, like you're instructed not to waste a single grain of rice. And you have to be really mindful of every single thing you're doing. I mean, if you ever make rice, you see, like, it's really hard not to have a grain of rice sticking to the side of the rice cooker or falling on the cupboard, you know, on the counter or whatever, right? But you're taught to do that. Um, and it's just very interesting because if you are, and he talks about Japanese tea ceremony and stuff, if you are really present, then you're aware of every element of the experience, and it's something quite extraordinary. You know, I remember um, when I took refuge with Tuku Rinpoche in my first 3 retreat, and I had already taken refuge with somebody else, I don't remember, but I wanted to take with him, you know. So we sat together in this little room, and he gave me the refuge, and he gave me a name, and he asked me to write down the name, and I had like a clipboard with some pieces of paper on it and this like ordinary pen. And I had been like taking some notes. And so I started to write the name at kind of the bottom of the page, you know, whatever. Okay, here's the name. And he's like, oh, give me that. And he took the clipboard from me and he turned it over so there was a fresh page. And he took the pen and he wrote my name on this clean piece of paper. And it was so elegant and so like this ordinary like Bic pen had it l- looked like a very fancy like quill, you know, with the big feather coming out of it, you know, and like golden ink on, you know, silk paper or something. Like it was so wild to see this ordinary everyday thing of writing a name on a piece of paper become so extraordinary because of Rinpoche's attention, you know, because of his like pure view, and his what they call in Trungpa Rinpoche's like sacred outlook. The paper was sacred, the moment was sacred, the pen was sacred, the name was sacred, and Rinpoche was fully aware and present in that whole process, right? And I just remember to this day, I mean, this was, 1990 or something, so 35 years ago ish. I remember it was like it's yesterday because I was so floored by the experience of that. These are the ways, one of the ways that we learn from just everything the master does, right? There was no instruction in that except give me the paper and pen. That was it. He wasn't saying like, now watch me be entirely present through this whole, and he just did it. And if we spend any time with someone who has that great of a realization, we can literally learn from everything they do, from how they eat, to how they walk, how they interact, how they blow their nose, how they look around the room, how they sit. Like everything is teaching if we're open to that, if we're in the present, and if we have some modicum of respect and faith towards them, trust in them, and sort of an idea of kind of who they are and that they're not ordinary. The things we can learn and be exposed to are really extraordinary. Okay, and then Rinpoche has this whole thing about communication, yeah, and leaving space and communication. So I'm kind of looking mostly at the top of page 157 there. And he talks about allowing space, yeah. And that's also a really interesting thing. And a compassionate way of being, actually. Normally when we're having a conversation, we're kind of, you know, shooting words at each other, there's a lot of sort of frenzy, yeah, and chaos, and we're just trying to like get our point across. And when the other person is talking, we're sort of thinking about like, what am I going to say next, right? And it's kind of half listening. But if we like slow it down and start to really try to listen and just not and pardon me, not anticipate and leave some sense of spaciousness there, it's really a different type of communication. All right, so
But it's
now
not very French. I'm making a joke.
no, it's not very French,
Is
but
there a way in French? I mean, I've studied French a bit, and I know you know that through the years. Is there a way that this could be extrapolated into that custom of the French, of the way that French speakers? Does that make sense, my question?
no, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Is there a way for them to change how they
Well,
communicate?
no, because in French, there's often in America, in English, we say, and then sometimes people will jump in during that time. But in French, there's, the connector sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be the pause? Je pense
No, I mean,
que.
no. I think that's an ordinary pause,
Yeah.
but I think what Rinpoche is talking about is something deeper of just like leaving space
Mm,
for the other person, leaving space for the communication itself to take
mhm,
place. And he says, in the question and answer section that like it's not actually something that you necessarily do consciously. I think it's again probably more a matter of being actually in the present moment
mm,
rather than scrambling kind of after the future,
mm.
you know. Aw. So such an
Uh,
idiot. So croissant. Okay.
I think it's a
Yeah.
continuation of all the things that we've been talking about before this.
Mm,
And just in communication, the communication, we're present with that other person. We're they're saying something and we're present like we are when we're meditating. It's not, like you said, thinking about what we're going to say next while they're still talking. We're present, and it's more of a clear communication as a result. Not
Mhm.
we're trying, not we're not trying. We're doing.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. So now we get to the shamatha questions. So,
I just
um,
wanted to say too that if Rinpoche had been writing texts, you know, in the era of texts, he said, imagine if we wrote letters without any punctuation, communication would be very chaotic.
truth, truth. Okay, so what is your question, Tess, on
I do have a
shamatha?
question. So he says here that shamatha meditation is associated with the Hinayana path, or the lesser vehicle, the disciplined or narrow path. Shamatha means peacefulness. Now, does this, is he, so this is a tricky question. In associating it with the Hinayana path, is he saying that shamatha is less desirable?
No. I think he's saying um that you know, we try to avoid using the word Hinayana. You know, he uses it a lot in his teachings, but I think it was before, you know, people
Mhm.
started to realize kind of, because Hinayana does mean lesser path, or lesser vehicle, or narrow path, or like that. Okay. But so people practicing that path felt that that was kind of insulting. Okay. But
Mhm.
it's not actually meant to be insulting. It's
Mhm.
just like, because from I'm going to use the word Theravada. So Hinayana is vehicle, and Hina means like lower. Okay. So Hinayana, so we try to avoid that. So we use Theravada. So
Mhm.
Theravada means way of the elders. Tara is elders, and Vada is like path. So Theravada means like way of the elders. So from their philosophy is that we can't enlighten anybody else. Like, we can't really help anybody else. It's up to us as individuals to walk the path, you know? And that
Mhm.
is something that, you know, kind of the Buddha taught. But so if you're just need one person on the vehicle, you have a smaller vehicle, you have like a moped or like a motorcycle, right? Whereas the Mahayana path, of which Vajrayana is a part, talks about liberating all sentient beings. So it's a great path. Maha means great, yana means path, right? Mahayana. Okay. So you need a large vehicle to carry all these people. But there really isn't a disagreement in a sense, because even from the Vajrayana or Mahayana point of view, they're not saying you can make someone else enlightened, right? Otherwise, we would all be enlightened, because Buddha would have done it out of his great compassion, where he just snaps his fingers or whatever, and everybody would be free from samsara. But we are the ones who, as individuals, who have to do the work. We have to do it ourselves. Nobody can do it for us, right? But as a bodhisattva, you know, the vow of the bodhisattva is to continue to return to cyclic existence until all beings are free. So we're not saying, oh, that, you know, bodhisattva is not saying, oh, I can enlighten others, but they're saying I can help them towards that end. That's the idea, right? Of helping others along the way, not doing it for them. Okay. So he's, you know, and like, our teacher and some other teachers too, and I think maybe the Dalai Lama too, I don't remember, talks about the Hinayana or Theravada as the foundational path. Yeah. So the Vajrayana begins really with the Theravada. We have to learn, you know, about these mindfulness practices and meditation and concentration and moral behavior and all of that stuff that is part of that path. Without that, there's no Mahayana, right? So that's the foundational
Mhm.
vehicle. It's very essential. So I don't think that he's talking about it as something lesser. I mean, he does put lesser vehicle in quotes, right?
I just wanted to make sure that because I didn't think so, but I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't, you know.
Yeah. So it's just like they have fewer, they also have fewer methods,
Mhm,
whereas like in
mhm,
the Vajrayana, there's so many different methods. But in the Theravada, there's really just very few methods
mhm.
actually. And it takes a very long time in comparison to the Vajrayana. Um, so shamatha is the Sanskrit word, and shine is the Tibetan word. And shine means calm, abiding. She is calm, and ne is associated with abiding. So shine means calm, abiding. Yeah. Um, so yeah. So when he says, when you see the nowness of of the very moment, there's no room for anything but openness and peace. So again, it's kind of relaxing into the present moment, allowing space for that. Okay, now we get on to the question and answer section. Um, towards the bottom of page 158, his answer, I just felt it was important to bring it up. In the beginning, we have the feeling that the spiritual search is something very beautiful, something that will answer all our questions. We must go beyond this kind of hope and expectation. And we might expect our teacher to solve all our problems, relieve all our doubts. But when we confront our teacher, he does not actually answer every question. He leaves many things for us to work out ourselves, which is a tremendous letdown and disappointment for us, as I can attest. Um, we have the expectation that spirituality will bring us happiness and comfort, wisdom and salvation. This literal egocentric way of regarding spirituality must be turned completely upside down. Finally, if we give up all hope of attaining any sort of enlightenment, then at that moment the path begins to open. The spiritual path works in this way. It is a matter of wearing out all expectation. So, that's interesting. And we see that, many people can see that just in day-to-day life, that things started to happen once they let go, once they just kind of were like, okay, you know, I'm just gonna deal with what is. And then things somehow it just seems to like give space for things to actually manifest rather than all of our grasping and attempts at egocentric manipulation. Yeah. Okay. Then on the next page, he says, when we allow a gap, then spontaneous, intuitive understanding of how to proceed on the path suddenly automatically comes to us. Yeah. So this is, an experience that many of us had in the 3-year retreat of struggling, and we didn't see the teacher every day. Sometimes in my first retreat, sometimes it was months before we saw anybody. But um, we start to work ourselves up into a frenzy trying to understand something and having a question and feeling very desperate to talk to the Lama because we feel like this question is so important, and then they don't come and they don't come and they don't come and they don't come. And we find ourselves reading a Dharma book and the answer appears, you know, or we're just in the middle of our meditation and we just like spontaneously understand, you know, say like, I don't know if it's a saying or if it's just something that came up in retreat or what, I don't remember, but we used to say, all the answers are on the cushion, you can always find the answers by just doing your practice. Okay. And then he talks in on page 161 Impatience means that you do not have a complete understanding of the process. If you see the completeness of each action, then you will not be impatient anymore. And then he talks in the next little section there about pious thoughts. Yeah, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm sure many of us are very plagued by that, in and out of meditation. And he said these pious thoughts are still thoughts and should not be cultivated. So even those thoughts are not really helpful. Then towards the bottom of page 162, he said, you have to want to explore everything, even though it may be ugly, painful, or repulsive. This kind of scientific mindedness is very important. Yeah. And this is, again, kind of related to starting where you are, facing where we are instead of always trying to be someplace else. Yeah. You can't, and then the next page, 163, it says, you cannot get around the problems of mind by manipulating things external to it. You cannot get around the problems of mind by manipulating things external to it. Yeah.
Where is it on page 163? I don't see it. I'm getting,
If you look at the second answer,
Mhm.
it's the second sentence after the semicolon. You cannot get around the problems of mind by manipulating things external to it. Confusion originates in mind, so one has to start directly with mind rather than attempting to go around it.
oh,
Okay, so we'll end here, and next week we will do the Bodhisattva path. Okay. In the syllabus, I have this as 2 classes, but like we're a class behind because we spent 2 classes on something. I don't even remember what it was. So I would like to get that done in 1 class if we can, so we can be back on schedule. So we'll start there. So please have all the questions for that the Bodhisattva path answered. I believe I sent those to you already.
Yeah.
I should have.
Yes.
Okay, so you should have those. Okay, so let's do the closing prayers now. Oops. If you could mute yourself while I'm trying to pull up the prayers, that would be great. There we go. Okay. So the long life prayers, we're just going to say once in Tibetan and then do the other things as usual. Henry Wawake away Shinkam Su Bendan De Wa Malu Juene Generous you want and Zingam Sui Shapeke Gaba to take your she Om Swasti Jigme Kempe Kalung Yamparu Kunkap Se Chen Se Bundawa Niter Dunsanam Ke Nabucho Se Che Gawe Shakinta Su So Om Swasti Se Lagam Sojin Abdun Junle Runzin Dap Se Yutu Pamawa Sansum Nadre Gapota Tene Lachantan De Shaitan Tage Sho Lama Gungam Sambo Soada Shutu Kuse Riwa Soada Trine Tashinge Pa Soada Amadandre Wa Me Pachingi Lo. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy and wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of cyclic existence, may I free all beings. Sonam de tamche zikpani, tone nebe janam pamche shi, kegana chi banon tupai, sipe sole droa sho. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, and perception in the state of divinity's mantras and dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret great yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Tenopa Tishtadrito Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sawasiri Me Prayacha Sawakarma Sutsa Me Chitam Shriyang Kuruhum Aha Ha Ha Ho Bhagavan Sawatata gata vajrama me mansa vajre pawamaha samaya sattva. Okay, so thank you so much for joining class today. And just another quick reminder, every morning, 7:30 to 8:30, if you can, it'd be great for these first 15 days. And if you can make the transmissions even for a little bit, that would be really great. There's more teachings coming up. John Canty, Melina sent an email recently. His Holiness Psychic Treason is going to be in upstate New York in May, giving a bunch of empowerments. I think it's May, so we'll send you that too. If you want to go, we can maybe arrange a group to go together. If I can be more patient than I was last time. Where did I do that? Oh, I thought I put it in here. I guess my calendar didn't update. Anyway, it's not until later in May. So think about if you want to do that. It's about a 7-hour drive, I think, and there's places to stay around there. But I'll look more into it for you. Meditation on YouTube Saturday morning. And yeah, that's it. Okay, thanks again. And just make sure you look at your email, okay, on Tuesday and Wednesday to see about the time that we're going to start class next Wednesday, okay? All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Have
you.